Possibly the two biggest elixir fragrances on the market today are going head to head. Hey friends, Ash here, welcome back to Gents. These two fragrances are going head to head in 10 different categories, and each fragrance will be scored from 1 to 10 in each one of those categories. At the end, we'll tally the scores up and determine which of these is the better fragrance, at least according to me. I also asked you guys on the community tab of the YouTube channel a little while back which one you thought was the best, and at the end of the video, we'll have the results of that poll also. So we'll see which fragrance more of you voted as the better of the two, and also my overall score for the two as well. I've got these both linked in the description below. Feel free to check them out down there. And also here are some codes, some discount codes at a bunch of different fragrance websites in case you shop there. Use those codes to save between 10 and 20% off depending on the site. I would say as of when I'm shooting this video, these are the two most loved, most hyped elixir fragrances on the market. And by elixir fragrances, I mean elixir flankers, because they keep coming out release after release after release. But these are the ones at the top of the mountain. And it's funny because they don't smell anything alike, but when you start putting them head to head, you see how closely matched these two fragrances are. And they really overlap a lot in terms of when you would use them. All right, on to the first category, the first matchup, the opening. The opening is for a lot of people the most important part of the fragrance, though I would argue that the dry down should be more important. But the opening is what you smell first. It's what really leaves a lasting impression in your mind, especially if you're out at a fragrance store and you grab it off the shelf, a tester bottle, and you go ahead and give it a spray. That first thing that hits your nose a lot of times is what you're going to remember that fragrance for. So, how good are the openings here? Well, for me, both of these are fantastic in the opening. I especially love that kind of honeyed warmth and sweetness that you get from Le Male Elixir. Really, basically a ramped up version of Le Male Le Parfum. It takes it to the next level, and I think that it smells extremely, extremely appealing when you first spray this on. I'm not gonna hide it. I am basically in love with this fragrance right now. I wear it any chance I can get. The opening, I think, is just spot on. Sauvage Elixir also smells really, really good in the opening. This one has more of like a classically masculine feel to it, though done in a modern style. It's another fragrance that is warm, just like Le Male Elixir, but this one has more of a focus on spices in there. You've got lavender here in Sauvage Elixir that gives it a little clean tinge, but really the focal point is going to be on the spices, cardamom, nutmeg, and cinnamon. So for me, opening wise, both of these huge winners, can't go wrong with either one. Sauvage Elixir, I'm gonna give a 9 out of 10. Le Male Elixir, a 9.5 out of 10. Yes, I legitimately like the openings that much. Now, the dry down. Again, for most people, the opening is what they're really going to remember, but the dry down lasts longer than the opening, so that's where you should really focus most of the time. And yeah, I love the dry down in both of these two. You have a good amount of woodiness that comes out in Sauvage Elixir, including licorice, vetiver, and sandalwood. It is nowhere near as sweet as Le Male Elixir. It's definitely between the two, the one that I would consider to be the classier fragrance and the more mature fragrance. Le Male Elixir, honey, tonka, vanilla, especially vanilla, that's going to be the focal point here, which does make this kind of fall in line a little bit more with what's popular on the market now that you see for men. Just lots of fragrances that are very warm, sweet, sexy, with a focus on vanilla. So the scores here, same as the opening. I do prefer, just in terms of what I like to smell, Le Male Elixir a little bit more right now than Sauvage Elixir, but not really by much at all. So a 9 here, a 9.5 here. Now let's talk versatility. And for me, in terms of versatility, these two are extremely closely matched. In terms of seasonality or daytime or nighttime use, about the same, frankly. Both of these lean more toward fall and wintertime use, early spring as well. Both of these lean more toward evening use than daytime use. You would think of Sauvage Elixir maybe as the more formal fragrance of the two, but then you would think of Le Male Elixir as maybe the sexier of the two, the more date night type of fragrance. People love both of these fragrances. These are not hard to wear, divisive scents or anything like that, but they are not year-round fragrances. That said, for me, I do find them still to be quite versatile, and I would give both of these a 7 out of 10. I know maybe I should pick one over the other, like give half a point more to Sauvage Elixir because maybe it's like slightly better for work use, but in general, I think I wouldn't go for either of these for office use. So for me, I think that they're pretty much the same. You would use them the same seasons, the same times potentially. Yeah. So for me, 7 out of 10 on both. I think that they do have good versatility. I do think that they can be used a little bit more than they sometimes get credit for, but they're not reaching that 8, 9, 10 level of versatility where you can use it just about anywhere. And now to complement factor, which is a huge deal for a lot of people. And I have to tell you, both of these are complement pullers. Now you would expect that from fragrances from either one of these lines because let's be real, Sauvage, that's a big complement pulling fragrance line. That's one of the reasons it sells so well. And Le Male, going back to the original, same thing. You've got a lot of heavy hitters in this line like Le Male de Parfum, Ultra Male, the original. I mean, even some of the other ones that get overlooked like On Board or In the Navy, those do really well at pulling positive attention. So both of these, big complement pullers. And once again, I'm going to have these tie in terms of complement factor, a 9 for each one. They do go about it in a different way. Sauvage Elixir, that's going to be more of your upscale, kind of classy, sophisticated, gentleman kind of fragrance that still does pull a lot of attention. And Le Male Elixir is going to be more sexy, sweet, alluring, that kind of scent profile. So they go about it in different ways, but they both get the job done really well. Now we're on to the performance side of things, starting off with longevity. And Sauvage Elixir lasts an eternity off my skin. This stuff lasts forever, which you would hope that it would, because when it was launched, it came in this size right here, 60 mils. Quite a bit smaller than your typical bottle size, which would be 75 and 125 or 50 and 100, but it came out in 60 mil size and was quite pricey, which we'll talk about later. They have since released a 100 mil bottle size, but again, the reason it was so small, one of the reasons, is because you didn't need that much of it. It just lasts forever and ever. If you spray it on your clothes, it's pretty much gonna be there until you wash them, possibly multiple times. But this guy over here, Le Male Elixir, is no slouch. It lasts a very long time as well. Great performance from both of these, which you would expect from a fragrance being called an elixir. That's kind of the deal nowadays. Elixir, it's almost like the new version of Extrait or something, as far as designer fragrances goes. So both of these, extremely long-lasting fragrances, but one of them does last a little while longer off my skin. The fragrance that lasts a bit longer, Sauvage Elixir. As far as designers go in terms of longevity, giving that a 10 out of 10. This is about as long-lasting a designer fragrance you're gonna find. Le Male Elixir, extremely good as well, but that's gonna get a 9. Sauvage Elixir does outperform the Jean Paul Gaultier. But it's not just longevity, it's also projection. So let's talk projection here. Both of these, as you probably already expect or know, project heavily. These are fragrances where you don't need to go too heavy to get the job done. They're gonna last all day, last all night. They're going to reach out and touch somebody. People will notice you when you have these on. And that kind of goes back to the compliment factor from before. These are easy to pick up and people like them. That leads to compliments. Same with longevity. One of these does project off my skin a bit better than the other. And the one that projects better, Sauvage Elixir again. In terms of projection, I'm gonna give this a 9.5. I know you're like, well, why not a 10? I don't know, man, it's just a 9.5, this is good enough. And Le Male Elixir, an 8.5. Again, still very strong, but not as strong as Sauvage Elixir. Now we're getting into the price, the cost of these two, and they're not cheap, especially this one. At full retail, Sauvage Elixir for this size, 60 mils, is $180. Or you can get the 100 ml size bottle, which is $250. Yeah, niche prices, basically. You can find this at discounters right now for about $145, and that's for this size bottle. So a slight discount, about 35 bucks off. Le Male Elixir at full retail is between $114 and $145. So much cheaper than Sauvage Elixir, but that's not all. It's also in a larger bottle. So $114 gets you a 75 ml size bottle, which is 15 mils more than Sauvage Elixir. So it's a better proposition. In terms of value for money, as of when I'm filming this video, I would give Sauvage Elixir a 7.5 and Le Male Elixir an 8.5. There are a couple reasons for that. Le Male Elixir, as of right now, now, you can't really find this at discounters. It's popped up at Fragrance Buy and I think Joma Shop, but it sells out like that. In the future, I'm expecting that you'll be able to find this at discounters, and the price will probably be, you know, in that like $85 to $90 range, if I had to guess. Maybe a little bit more for the larger size bottle, but somewhere around there. And at that point, I would maybe bump this up a little bit more even, to like a 9. Sauvage Elixir, while it is an expensive designer, extremely expensive, I think that it's still not a bad value because the performance here is so high, you don't really need much of it. So it's gonna last you a long time. So even though these are pricey fragrances, when you consider the compliment factor, when you consider the longevity, they're still a pretty good value. Now let's talk perceived quality for that price. I have to say, between these two, Sauvage Elixir does strike me as the higher quality fragrance. Just in terms of when you smell this compared to this, when you're talking the ingredient quality, it does, to me, come across like the pricier fragrance. Like if I knew nothing about this, they didn't even exist, and you handed me a blank sample of each one and you said, which one of these has more expensive ingredients? I would think Sauvage Elixir. But this is perceived quality for price, so you also kind of have to take into account that Le Male Elixir, while it doesn't maybe smell as high quality, Sauvage Elixir is cheaper by a decent amount. So here, I'm going to give them both good scores. These are both killer fragrances. I mean, they don't really have weaknesses to me. But for the scores here, for perceived quality for price, Sauvage Elixir, it's an 8.5, Le Male Elixir, an 8. Ooh, presentation up next. Both of these have nice presentations. I think they both look really good, very classy. Well, as classy as a torso with no arms or head or legs can look. The Sauvage Elixir bottle is a nice step up, maybe a slight one, but a nice step up from the normal Sauvage presentations, where they have inset where it says Sauvage Elixir here on the front, makes it look a little bit nicer, a little bit higher end. It also has a really nice magnetic cap, and you know I like that. In typical Christian Dior fashion, the atomizer, really good. And then the box is even a step up where the top comes off and then the bottle sits inside like a little showpiece. Le Male Elixir really pumped things up. They even upgraded the little pull tab, which I think is necessary because it looks so cheap on the other bottles in this line. And it's not like this looks super high end, but it's a step up. It's a move in the right direction. The gold on the outside of the bottle looks fantastic. This dark ambery color with the stripes, very well done also. Atomizer, really good, as is typical with this line. And then the can, not the box, the can looks very nice as well. So both of these have very good presentations as far as designer fragrances goes. The one that I personally like more, believe it or not, is Le Male Elixir. I think it's just more attention grabbing, eye grabbing, and somehow looks really good. Even though I thought maybe it would be kind of tacky when I first saw the pictures, I like the way it looks. But both of these are quality. A 9 for the Jean Paul Gaultier and 8.5 for the Dior. And that moves us into the final category, which is uniqueness. Which of these fragrances stands out more against its peers? Le Male Elixir, while being a fantastic fragrance, does have some similarities to other things out there. Obviously, Le Male Parfum jumps to mind first, and then it's been compared to Armani Code Absolu by some people. And then there's also the fact that, as I talked about before, it's a vanilla-forward fragrance in a time of vanilla-forward fragrances for men. There's a lot of stuff out there right now that is making use of vanilla or caramel, toffee, chestnut, things like this that are not necessarily alike in terms of the fragrances being a one-to-one, but they're all in the same style, kind of like blue fragrances. You could say Sauvage and Bleu de Chanel and Y Eau de Parfum and L'Homme Rocus and Dylan Blue. None of these smell exactly the same as each other, but we all know that they're doing the same thing, right? That's kind of what's going on here. Sauvage Elixir, when that came out, no, really nothing like that. It has this sort of 80s vibe to it, this 80s feel to it, but then done in a very modern way. So it doesn't end up smelling like your grandpa's fragrance, for example. I feel really bad about saying that because I love 80s fragrances, but you understand what I'm trying to get to here. It actually does its own thing. It wasn't trying to be something else that was already on the market. It wasn't trying to fit in with everything else that was doing the same thing. So in terms of uniqueness, I think between the two, Sauvage Elixir wins wins pretty comfortably. A 9 for Sauvage Elixir, a 7 for Le Male Elixir. And so when we add all of that up, out of a possible 100 points, Le Male Elixir gets 85, which is really, really good. Sauvage Elixir, 87. So yeah, essentially uniqueness at the end puts this one over the top. I will say, even though Sauvage Elixir won here, obviously both of these are awesome. I love both. This was my #1 fragrance for this fall for a reason. And in certain situations, I would take Le Male Elixir over Sauvage Elixir. Of course, vice versa is true. Like on a date, probably go for this one. More formal situation, going for this one. But how did you guys vote? Well, this one was decently close. It actually waffled back and forth for a little bit before it settled into the final score, final polling percentage. And the winner, as determined by you guys, 57% to 43% Sauvage Elixir. So a 14 percentage win from you guys for Sauvage Elixir. So on this one, we agree. I still love you though. So which one wins between Le Male Elixir and Sauvage Elixir? Always does that. They're both amazing fragrances, but this time Sauvage Elixir wins. I want to thank you guys for hanging with me. Let me know in the comments other fragrances that should be matched up. Stay safe out there. I'll see you tomorrow with another fragrance video. See you later.